There are 5 plausible hypotheses outside the official statement that analysts, diplomats, or political observers might suggest in explaining why President Trump redesignated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Domestic political signaling to U.S. evangelical voters. The move could have been aimed at energizing Trump's Christian conservative base ahead of an election cycle. Evangelical and Catholic advocacy groups in America have long called attention to violence against Christians in Nigeria. By taking a strong stance, Trump could reinforce his image as a defender of global Christianity, a narrative that resonates strongly with his core supporters. Strategic leverage over Nigeria's foreign policy. The designation might serve as leverage to pressure Nigeria's government on broader issues such as oil trade, arms procurement, or alignment with China and Russia. Nigeria has increased its cooperation with non-Western powers for military hardware and infrastructure loans. Labeling it a country of concern could be a diplomatic tool to push Nigeria back toward American alignment. Soft power and geopolitical competition in Africa. The move may reflect America's competition with China's growing influence in Africa, using human rights as a soft power instrument. The CPC designation might be intended to cast China-aligned states as unreliable or morally compromised, strengthening America's narrative of being the defender of democracy and religious freedom. Internal American bureaucratic or advocacy pressure. Certain State Department officials, NGOs, or think tanks might have lobbied for the redesignation due to long-standing advocacy work. American religious freedom commissions and advocacy networks routinely publish reports urging CPC listings for countries like Nigeria. The administration might have acted to satisfy these groups or to appear responsive to civil society input. Political messaging toward Nigerian American voters. The action could be a symbolic gesture to appeal to diaspora communities, particularly Nigerian American Christians who have become increasingly active in American politics. By signaling concern for Nigeria's Christians, Trump could strengthen support among African immigrant communities and demographic Republicans have recently sought to attract. On the opposite side are 5 counter-hypotheses suggesting that the decision to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern might have been based on genuine policy or humanitarian factors rather than primarily political motives. Escalating religious and ethnic violence in northern Nigeria. The designation reflects real and worsening violence between religious and ethnic groups, especially in the Middle Belt and northern regions. Reports by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the American Commission on International Religious Freedom have documented killings, abductions, and church burnings targeting both Christians and Muslims. The CPC label could be a way to pressure Abuja to increase security and accountability rather than to punish it politically. Rising activity of terrorist groups, Boko Haram, ISWAP, bandits. The move responds to a resurgence of extremist violence with clear religious dimensions. Boko Haram and ISWAP continue to conduct attacks on civilians and religious targets. Rural bandit gangs are expanding operations. The rationale from a counterterrorism standpoint, acknowledging religious persecution, could help coordinate international responses and humanitarian aid. Concern over impunity and weak governance. The U.S. administration might believe Nigeria's government is failing to protect minority groups or prosecute perpetrators of religiously motivated violence. Evidence of this is characterized by local and international watchdogs, which have criticized the Nigerian justice system for weak investigations and inconsistent protection of victims. The Nigerian can be bought or sold as long as you have the money to pay for this. This designation could be a diplomatic means to demand accountability and reforms without resorting to sanctions or direct intervention. Response to human rights reports and congressional briefings. The decision may have followed official recommendations from U.S. agencies or independent commissions. The evidence we have is that the USCIRF has consistently urged that Nigeria remain on the CPC list due to systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. The rationale is that the Trump administration may have been acting on expert advice rather than purely political calculations. Preventive diplomacy to forestall regional instability. The U.S. could be using the designation as a preventive tool to avert wider regional destabilization. Religious and ethnic conflict in Nigeria risks spilling into neighboring states such as Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, all key security partners. The CPC status might be intended to encourage Nigerian authorities to address root causes before violence undermines regional security. My overall assessment of the most consistent interpretation is that the Trump administration's redesignation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern reflects a convergence of A. Real deterioration in religious freedom and violence, and B. A political opportunity to signal moral leadership to U.S. religious constituencies and to exert strategic leverage in Africa. In the end, distributing Bibles, bags of rice, a bottle of malt, and meat pie, or promoting paid mouthpieces won't resolve this issue easily. The Nigerian president ought to be aware that although the American president isn't free of corruption speculation, the American president, Trump, particularly loathes people associated with drug peddling. Inferring that most of this is done for oil doesn't answer the most significant question, which is that the current leadership of Nigeria is either incapable of dismantling criminal or religious criminals who are killing Christians because they are of other faiths, or killing Muslims who've refused to join their senseless war.